Buongiorno a tutti.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks very much for coming along. I apologise about the slight delay. The Conference of Presidents overran, and the President is now going to brief you on various issues, particularly Brexit.
Allora, buongiorno, grazie.
So, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming along. The Conference of Presidents meeting was the first one after the summer holidays, and it was fascinating. We noted the Commission candidate list. We started to organise the programme for the hearings for the new commissioners, and it's going to take us up to October the 23rd. That's when there's going to be a vote in plenary in Strasbourg, when we'll vote to approve the new commissioners. The thing that you'll be most interested in, I think, though, on between the 30th of September and October the 8th, that's when the hearings are going to be held in the European Parliament for the commissioners designate. They're going to be held 2 every morning and 2 every afternoon. They'll be held in parallel, of course, because each commissioner needs to have all of the Parliament committees who we wanted to question him or her about the portfolio that the commissioner will be dealing with. So as I've said, that whole process will end with a final vote on the 23rd of October in Strasbourg, and that will allow the new commission to take office on November the 1st. When it comes to the relationship between Commission and Parliament, I can tell you that political groups made some comments about certain portfolios, the names that have been given to certain portfolios, and so I took the liberty of getting in touch and asking Ms von der Leyen to come to the Conference of Presidents so that she could listen to the views of the political groups. That'll happen next week in Strasbourg. The second big decision. Before the summer, in the part session, we promised that there would be a debate on foreign external interference in Europe. Now, you'll be aware that this is an issue which many of you have raised, and investigation has thrown some light on this, and the political groups have asked to talk about it, and we decided today not just to debate it, but to wind up the debate with a resolution. The political groups will, of course, be coming up with a resolution, the ones who have been particularly keen on getting that discussion. The next item on the agenda, as you'll be aware, of course, is Brexit. We've invited Mr. Barnier to come to the next Conference of Presidents meeting to tell us about the state of play so we can get a better idea of the positions of the EP contact group, and also the chief negotiator's position, and assess the most recent developments in an issue which, as you'll be aware, tends to have something new happening every day. It's obviously not our place to get involved in the internal debate in the UK, but we are going to have, of course, to firm up a European Parliament and European Union position. There's a great deal of agreement with the positions that have already been adopted by Mr. Barnier, and the European People's Party, the S&D group, and Renew Europe, the Greens and the GUE, have decided to table a resolution in the next part session, next week in Strasbourg. A resolution will approve of the work that's been done so far and will re-establish the key points of the European position and stress the unity which exists on the European Union side and the institutions side on this particular issue. You'll be aware of all of this because you're the people who report on our debates to the public, and you're aware that we talk about all of these issues, and there's often a great deal of difference of opinion on issues in Europe, but on Brexit there's a great deal of unity, and Parliament wants to keep that unity going and update it when the situation changes. The resolution I mentioned in 3 parts. First of all, has a political declaration. Second part is on no deal, and the third part is on a possible extension of Article 50. On the political declaration and the withdrawal agreement, Parliament continues to believe that a orderly departure of the UK is the goal which we should be searching for, and that a political agreement is the way of getting it. The withdrawal agreement that has been negotiated is the best possible agreement as far as we are concerned, particularly bearing in mind the inherent difficulties with Brexit and the positions that are regarded as being red lines by both sides because they guarantee legal certainty and set up governance mechanisms which make sure that the agreement will be applied correctly, and because they also protect the rights and life choices of European and British citizens. Obviously, the backstop is the main stumbling block in the negotiations. Here, the resolution stresses a very clear message. You can't have an agreement without the backstop. It couldn't really be any clearer. That's the position of the European Commission, the position of the European institutions, including the European Parliament. And don't forget, Parliament will have the last word. After that, I can say that we're perfectly happy to examine any proposals which are made. We're not ruling anything out. If solutions are proposed, they will be debated, all of them, provided they, of course, respect the guiding principles of the European Union. But up to now, I can say, and I'd like to stress this point, the United Kingdom hasn't proposed any alternatives. And anything that's been legally credible, if I can put it that way, and workable. On our side, I'd like to say that we are willing to go back to the original EU proposal. This is a very significant point. It's really an act of trust in dialogue and discussion. We're willing to go back to the original EU proposal, which is that a backstop will only be valid for Northern Ireland. We're happy to look at the political declaration again and make it into a legally binding document and conclude an association agreement which, of course, if it's sufficiently rooted, would make a backstop unnecessary. And then there's a question that's dealt with in the resolution, which is the question of the no-deal scenario. The resolution stresses the concern of the Parliament on recent developments in the debate in the United Kingdom and the breaking off of negotiations, which do bring us closer to the possibility of no deal. We believe there's too much rigidity and this rigidity is something that's being reified into the date of October the 31st. Now, the resolution says that if there is a no-deal departure, that will be entirely the responsibility of the United Kingdom. And of course it's still bound by its financial obligations and the need to respect the rights of citizens as well as the Good Friday Agreement. The resolution is absolutely unambiguous on this matter. And Parliament will not give consent to any agreement that doesn't address these issues and contain them. And that brings me on to the resolution from the previous Parliament, where we said we didn't want to ever have to face the UK with an ultimatum. Then there's the issue of extension. The resolution says that we are open to a possible extension, provided that it's something that's done for overriding reasons, like avoiding no deal, having a general election, or extending Article 50. That's the content, basically, of the resolution, which will put Parliament, as I say, on the same footing as the other institutions in clarifying what our position is. It's an issue which we didn't ask for, but we do fully respect the parties involved. What we want to do, of course, is defend the interests of the European Union, but also we want to look after the interests not only of European citizens but UK citizens as well. And we hope that the institutions in the United Kingdom will work to the same goal. We deeply wish that, because this issue, this matter, is terribly painful as far as we are concerned. But we've reached a moment where we really need to express our positions with firmness and clarity. Thank you very much indeed.
La proposición de resolución.
Thank you very much, President. The text of the resolution will be available at the back of the room a bit later, and also on the Parliament website. And now we will take some questions.
Televisione svizzera, sono qui presente. Buongiorno, può
From Swiss TV, can you confirm the issue of the name of the portfolio, the protection of the European way of life? Is that the only one, or are there other names for portfolios which you found problematic? And what extra things can we expect in these hearings on that? Well, says the President, we wanted to be absolutely clear and respect the rules and the treaties when we organised them. And I think the individual group chairman should answer your question. But there's no secret that there are objections to some of the names, as I said, of the portfolios which have been put forward by President van der Leyen. And I've asked the President to come to the Conference of Presidents on the 19th, I believe it is, so that we can talk about this. I think lots of people are thinking about this, and it'll launch the dialogue between ourselves and her very nicely, I believe.
From BBC News, you've just been speaking with Michel Barnier. Could you tell us, please, what is the latest assessment of the negotiations? There were quite a few hours yesterday. Is the UK moving towards a solution? Is it simply trying to remove the backstop and propose partial solutions? And is that going to be acceptable to the EU?
Se fosse così...
No, if that were the case, we wouldn't need this resolution. Unfortunately, the signals that we're getting aren't indicating that there's any initiative that could reopen the negotiations. It's not the way we see it. And we're unhappy about that. You're familiar with Mr. Barnier's view. He expressed it this morning in the Conference of Presidents meeting. I know we'd like there to be initiatives to discuss, but unfortunately there aren't any.
Griselda Pastor de la Radio Española SER.
Hola.
President, hola.
Hello, I'm from Spanish radio. The conditions for the extension that you have stated, are these the only conditions? And the conditions you set out for the backstop, again, is this the only conditions that you would accept as the European Parliament?
È un punto preliminare.
This is a key preliminary point, if you like, because if there's no agreement on that, it's not going to be easy to talk about the other issues. And nothing new is forthcoming, and I don't think discussing the backstop is really going to lead anywhere. We want an agreement, but we're aware that an agreement without a backstop, it wouldn't work.
Prego.
Sì. Lorenzo.
Lui.
No, scusa, sì. Lei.
Io?
Sì.
Sì, Giovanni Del Re per di Avvenire. Però c'è una cosa che io vorrei che...
From Avvenire, something that I'd like to know from yourself and other institutions. You've said that you'd rather see no deal than give up the backstop. And the UK for the last 6 weeks doesn't seem to have moved. In fact, yesterday, Boris Johnson had basically ruled out your idea of a backstop just covering Northern Ireland. So a no deal would lead to a hard border. Would you rather see that? Reply. Let me repeat what I said before, because this is a very important element in the resolution that's going to be tabled next week. There can't be an agreement without a backstop. There won't be one. No agreement without a backstop. That's the key position, and everything begins from that. If you don't want to talk about that, that means you don't want to talk at all, and there's nothing to talk about.
du journal Le Soir. Bonjour, Monsieur le Président.
From Le Soir. Hello, Mr. President. I would like to come back to the titles for the Vice President. So the Protecting the European Way of Life. You are the President of the European Parliament. You, I imagine, would know quite a lot about the European way of life. This falls under the competence of the institution that you preside. So without asking for a definitive judgment, How do you, as President of the European Parliament, see this? Is it just an issue in the name itself? Is it a problem in defining what is the European way of life? Or is there a political issue here with regards to the portfolio or vice presidency in question? So I'd like to hear your opinion as President of Europeans of the European Parliament.
Ma mi sembra di essere stato molto...
I thought I was pretty clear on that. Some portfolio titles have given rise to some confusion. I didn't see the key words like immigration, for example. Culture, that's not in there. Or research, that's another word that's missing. I think these are very important words, because you can't say innovation and young people. That doesn't mean research, and it doesn't mean culture. And we are aware of this in the European Parliament because they are words that we are familiar with, and their meanings are clear to us. So I think that some of the comments that have been made, and some of them have been made publicly, should be borne in mind. And I hope. I assume that probably in the rush to give names to these portfolios, there was a slightly casual approach, and we ended up with these rather curious names that some of them have got. But that doesn't mean that some of these words couldn't come back in. And at the same time, we could still have the definitions of the portfolios that we've got here. I think that President von der Leyen will probably be doing something along those lines right now. And so I do hope that, as I said, when she comes to the Conference of Presidents on the 19th, we'll get the requisite clarity on all of this.
Yes.
Thank you. Joe Barnes from the Daily Express. So in your resolution, you are critical of Boris Johnson for suspending Parliament. As a parliamentarian, would you ever suspend Parliament for such a length of time in order to allow kind of negotiations to carry on over here? Or during such important discussions that are Brexit? Thank you.
Io penso che I parlamenti debbano...
I'm in favour of parliaments being open permanently, particularly when they're deciding on the destiny of a great nation such as the United Kingdom. Everyone was very struck, I think, by the decision. I think it really dated back to a time when parliaments were a bit different, but in today's Europe, parliaments are the house of democracy, the voice of the people. And if you can't discuss the destiny of a country in a parliament, where can you do it? That's why we were struck by the decision taken by the Prime Minister. I think it's good for parliaments to stay open. That's the way we like them.
Dmitry Shkurko, National News Agency of Ukraine. We've seen, President, your reaction on relief of Oleg Sentsov from Russian prisoner. Is the European Parliament going to maintain its demand to Russia to relieve all the rest political prisoners in Russia? And the second question is that exchange of prisoners between Ukraine and Russia enough excuse for Russia for multiple Russian violations of international law? Thanks.
Lei sa benissimo che su...
I'm sure you're aware that when it comes to the rule of law and individual freedoms, it's not simply committees and the parliamentary bodies, but something that the plenary has always paid enormous attention to. When it comes to Oleg Sentsov, he has health problems, I'm sorry to say, but he has been invited to come to Brussels or Strasbourg. He was, of course, awarded the Sakharov Prize last year, and he's been invited to come to Brussels or Strasbourg to receive it. And we'll be extremely happy to see him if he is able to travel. Today, in the Conference of Presidents, I said that I'm going to be carrying out a visit to the Ukraine myself.
Christian.
Oui, excusez-moi de revenir sur...
Yes, sorry to come back. I'm here, just right at the back.
There's a light in my eye, so I can't really see you properly. Sorry.
Today, during the conference, certain group chairs suggested sending a letter to President von der Leyen to change the title of Mr. Shinas's portfolio. Other groups said this wouldn't be useful. I met Mr. Weber coming out of the Conference of Presidents who didn't see any reason in changing this name. So I want to know, is there a consensual solution with regards to this problem? It appears to bother a lot of people in the EU. So are you going to try and find a solution based on compromise, or is this something that's really going to overshadow the hearings?
Thanks for the question, but you weren't precisely accurate. We're not going to send a letter. There was a debate in the Conference of Committee Chairmen yesterday, and today the issue was discussed in an informal way with the group chairman. There are comments which we are making, but we're confident that the whole issue will be sorted out and clarified. This is not something that is a major argument. We just want to clarify and understand better why certain portfolios have been given the titles that they've been given. But we'll be talking about it, as I said, with Ms von der Leyen on the 19th, and I'm sure that she will answer all of the questions that we might have.
Well, let's try and take a few more questions. The lady here.
Buongiorno Presidente, Claudia Vanni di Mediaset News.
Claudio Vanni from Mediaset in Italy. You're talking about words like migration, but there are still 82 people who are on a ship between Italy and Malta, and the President of the Council has been trying to find new agreements as far as migration is concerned. Reply. Well, as soon as I was elected, I talked about this, and I have to say it again and again. It seems if we don't deal with the political issue, then every week there'll be 300 people, 80 people, 200 people on a vessel trying to get to Europe. And we need to get round this way of not dealing with the issue and taking issue with the actual poor people who are on these vessels. We're talking about this with all European leaders, and we need to do two things. First of all, do what the Parliament proposed to Council back in December 2017. Reform the Treaty of Dublin. This isn't some kind of Bible that can't be touched. It's simply a legal instrument to say that if someone goes to Greece or Italy or Spain or Malta, is in Europe, and Europe needs to equip itself to deal with the issue. Because if we're waiting for a full treaty revision, ladies and gentlemen of the press, then basically we'd all be retired before that happens. So we need policies which make it possible for Europe to act in a responsible way and not to tackle this in a way that simply relies on volunteers doing it. We need to make certain it's done properly, and if we reform Dublin, we would be able to make sure it was done properly. I've said this right from the start. I'm pleased that people are now talking about reforming Dublin, because it's an issue that we started running and now there's a public debate on it, and I'm pleased that governments aren't referring so much to the regulation, but they're trying to put it now on the agenda of the council and are talking about Dublin. So there's no point every week telling off some families or some men and women who are spending some nights on a vessel unable to land. That's horrible. So we need to look at this in the medium and the long term, because the migration phenomenon is an issue which is going to affect us, but future generations as well.
On behalf of Press TV. Mr. President, I have a question on external affairs. It's in relation to Iran. Do you believe the majority in the European Parliament are in favour of saving the Iran nuclear deal? And if so, how do you think they can help in this regard?
Insomma, l'Unione ha una sua posizione.
There's an EU position on this. I'm sure that you're aware of it. Parliament voted on this in the last edition. We're in favour of instruments which will reduce tension, and in favour of instruments, legal instruments, which will allow parties, even if they are very different from one another, to talk to each other. But lowering tension is good, and I think it'll help sort some problems out. And Parliament, as I say, voted on this last time and wanted to support the agreement.
Asca News, Presidente, vorrei ritornare un attimo su Dublino.
Can I come back to Dublin, Mr. President? The Italian Prime Minister has been appointed, and the problem in the past was the unwillingness of Council to pick up Parliament's 2017 proposal, which, as you said, could sort this all out. Italy was one of the countries which was most closely involved in the question of landings and were unwilling to help the reform process of Dublin along. Has the Prime Minister now told you, the new one said, that Italy wants to actually get the Dublin report going? Or there'll probably be a meeting in Malta on the 23rd on landings between the countries most directly involved? Do you think they'll be able to come up with emergency-type solutions? Well, says the President, please don't ask me to express a view on what individual ministers or governments are doing. I've heard that the Italian government has said they want binding measures and want to look again at the question of reforming the Dublin regulation. That, for me, has to be the basis for any discussion which will allow us to have a European policy, a genuine European policy. A European policy doesn't just derive from a good idea or from a need. It's a process. And the basis of all of this, if we want to have a policy which shares out responsibilities, has to be done like that. On the basis of solidarity, it can't be done on a voluntary basis, and it means that the governing regulation needs to be reformed. Because if you land in Malta, that means you're in Europe. That's the position that we should adopt. There's an awful lot of work still to be done. We don't want to deceive public opinion that if we do this, the whole problem will be sorted out. That's not the case. We shouldn't be in the business of trying to deceive people. We need to equip ourselves with the measures which will allow us to tackle not just what's happening now, what's making the headlines now, but the future as well, and that's in the interest of all European citizens. Thank you very much.
Bene, vi ringrazio. È stato un piacere.
Thank you, that was tremendous fun.